Happy Sabbath to all of you attending the Health to Wholeness Retreat in Australia. I'm John Everblest, coming to you from Northwest Nebraska, USA. It is exciting to see a revival of the great Adventist health reform movement. There's 3 of them that I know of so far. It's a grassroots movement for sure, and that is beginning to rise with power, and we can see that. And it's going to be needed more and more and more. I believe that forced drugging crisis was used of God to wake up his church and the world to his natural law healthcare system in preparation for the final crises which are soon to befall on us. And it's already kind of working its way up. Part of that preparation is learning how to wield God's healing agents of nature. Today, that healing agent is the mind. You never hear that, but it is, or the will, especially as it pertains to eradicating fear and enhancing health. So let's start with prayer, and then I'll share the screen. Lord Father, we thank you for your incredible power to change our lives, power to heal, and your willingness to be our caretakers. Thank you for that. And I ask for the Spirit of God to be with the audience and with my speaking here. Be with my voice to keep it strong and help us to focus on what each of us needs to hear individually, sir. We thank you, Lord. Amen. Okay, we're going to start the whole screen sharing thing. Kind of new to this Zoom. Hey, look at that. And it works. Okay. The topic today is men's hearts failing them for fear. I'm probably going to shut off this little video here because it gets in the way of so many other things, but you'll still hear me, I hope. We shall see. Let me go to that. Says stop video. Okay, here we go. All right, men's hearts failing them for fear. You see down there, battlecreeksanitarium.com. That's where you can read about my presentations, the ones that are available and about the ones that are coming. I film these presentations as I have time, money, and working equipment. All right. Oh, yes. Hold on. All right. The mind was given incredible power to assist in our health and healing. But if we allow fear to hijack that power, it will break our trust in God, destroy our health, and send us to an early grave. The biblical healing principles and techniques in this lecture enabled the author, me, to extricate himself from a 1.5 years of debilitating fear, anxiety, and panic attacks, and the many symptoms it manifested. This story tells God's leading in teaching the author how to wield the power of the mind in very practical ways. And it's not just about treating the sick, but to stand in the coming end-time crises. The habit of indulging in fear must be overcome. Our eternal destinies are at stake. Luke 21:25 says, "And there shall be signs in the sun, and in the moon, and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth." It's coming, folks. Daniel 12:1 tells us, "There shall be a time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation." Those who are loyal to God will see every earthly support cut off. Because they refuse to break his law in obedience to earthly powers, they will be forbidden to buy or sell. We've already semi-experienced that with the whole forced drugging thing, and it's coming back. From the Great Controversy, page 622, the 1888 version, it is often the case the trouble is greater in anticipation than in reality. But this is not true of the crisis before us. The most vivid presentation cannot reach the magnitude of the ordeal, nor can this image. Those who exercise but little faith now are in the greatest danger of falling under the power of satanic delusions and the decree to compel the conscience. And even if they endure the test, they will be plunged into deeper distress and anguish in the time of trouble, because they have never made it a habit to trust in God. The lessons of faith, which they have neglected, they will be forced to learn under a terrible pressure of discouragement. That's the cost of delay to replace fear with faith. So what does the Bible tell us may be the cost of failure to replace fear with faith? Revelation 21:8 tells us that the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable and murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Fear, the fearful? Well, that implies that fear is a sin. So if the fearful will not be allowed into heaven, then we must deal with fear right now. This text is telling us that fear is a symptom of something bad that God will not allow into heaven. Fortunately, it means that fear is not just an uncontrollable reaction on our part, which is good news in that we have divine help to overcome. The work of the people of God is to prepare for the events of the future, which will soon come upon them with blinding force. That means rapidly, quickly, all of a sudden. Apparently, a real part of that preparation is dealing with fear before it destroys us. The prison of fear, the danger of indulging fear. You ever look at it that way? When you're fearing and choose not to hack it off, that's indulging fear. And this is my story. I indulged in fear for 1.5 years without even knowing I was doing it. I didn't know it was a thing. I didn't know I had any power over it. I was so wrong. Besides the obvious of fear causing heart failure, men's hearts failing them for fear, there are many other health dangers associated with fear. My own experience is a painful example of what can happen when fear is indulged. My story includes how God led me out of that. Let me turn on my video again. Let's see if it gets in the way or not. We'll see. Okay, let me move that up. And let's continue on. Gallbladder surgery, my gallbladder. Back up. I was almost 50 years of age when I had my gallbladder removed. It was a routine outpatient procedure with no complications. The nurses were amazed at my medical history, which showed no list of chronic degenerative diseases at all. From their experiences, no one reaches 50 without acquiring a list of illnesses and a bag full of pharmaceuticals. Nevertheless, to my chagrin, the bad gallbladder told on me that I had not been living up to all the health principles I believed in. Mystery medical problems after surgery. Let's see if that moves. All right. After surgery, however, I soon started developing all sorts of problems. Neither I nor my doctor knew why. All sorts of tests were done. 6 visits to the ER, and I just kept getting sicker. The following, the next slide, the following is the list of illnesses that developed over 1.5 years. But keep in mind, as I will explain in more details later on, all these symptoms were caused by fear and anxiety. I didn't know that at the time. You get that advantage point here. Now, I didn't realize it until actually a year and a half into it. It happened to me because I did not know that fear could affect the mind and body this way. That's why I'm telling you about it now. And we're just going to start here. And there were so many symptoms, quote, / diseases that my fear manifested in, caused. Digestion. I had to arrange it in categories, for crying out loud. Nausea times 3 months. Diarrhea for many months. Chronic bloating, chronic shaking, especially after eating fruit. A sinking feeling in energy and in my tummy upon attempting to eat. Every time I took a bite, it's like my energy just kind of sunk. That was the mind that did that. It was fear. It was like food gave me no energy for a year and a half. I lost 20 pounds, went from 148 to 128 pounds. I stopped off at a pastry place I was driving through near Berrien Springs, bought a pastry because, I really wanted one, but I was afraid of it. I thought, well, maybe I get home soon enough, I get charcoal or something. But it gave me severe intestinal cramps upon eating the pastry. I couldn't make it stop. It was very difficult. The pastry didn't do that. My mind did. The vicious circle here is that the more fear I indulged about what I ate, the worse I got. Fatigue, chronic fatigue, adrenal fatigue, constant scary back pain caused by chronic stress, according to my doctor. And yeah, it was right where my adrenals were, in my back. The second most frightening of all my symptoms was the constant pain in my back from adrenal fatigue. I was so scared. I thought I was dying. I asked the pastor to come over and anoint me or pray for me. Susan, my wife, and I were praying together, and I was desperate. But I finally, on my knees with my wife, surrendered to God unto death. I chose to trust him while crying my eyes out with the thought of dying and suffering. But when I got up from prayer, God had healed my adrenal pain, but all the other symptoms remained. And just so you know, I did not feel like surrendering myself to God unto death. I felt only dread and sinfulness, no particular sense of peace whatsoever. God's gift to me here was the healing of my adrenal pain, but I had more to learn before God would show me the way out completely. Sleep. Insomnia, very difficult to sleep, and sleep apnea. Oh my word, sleep apnea. For those of you who don't know what that means, sleep apnea means you stop breathing in the middle of the night. I went to I'm backing up and telling you this story. I went to a home lifestyle center program hoping they could fix all my symptoms. Instead, their program made me exponentially worse. And it was such a small little thing that they did. I was scared of everything. My health was spiraling out of control. I didn't take their supplements because I was afraid they would hurt me. They thought I took them, but I didn't. I didn't do their coffee enemas because I was afraid of what coffee might do. But when they made dinner with vinegar against the counsels of Ellen White, that little bit of nothing destroyed me. I ate it in real fear. That was the night when the sleep apnea began. It was the most frightening and awful of all my symptoms. I mean, talk about panic attacks. As soon as I would doze off that night, and I would wake up with a gasp, gasping for breath all night long. This happened over and over, many nights at random for a year. I had to buy a CPAP machine to help me breathe, which, by the way, just intensified my anxiety and panic when I tried to use it. You know, a mask over your face, sealed, trying to breathe. So I didn't use it. It was, It was awful. Hair, my hair started falling out. Ears, my ears would ring upon going to bed. The ringing started in my ears every night as I was about to lie down to sleep. I hated going to bed because of the dread of sleep apnea. My fear of it caused my ears to ring upon physically approaching the bed. And it was a mystery to me back then. I didn't understand that it was based on fear. It was bizarre. I had no control of my life whatsoever. By the way, I had it so bad, all these different things, I turned all of my decisions over to my wife. Can you imagine that? Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing. I was also very sensitive to noise. The mouth, I had a raspy voice, dry mouth, completely dry mouth while sleeping. Okay. Heart. High heart rate upon leaving the house. I was scared to leave access to help. So whenever I took a walk and went even the slightest bit away from my house, my heart rate started going up. My chest started tightening. I was having panic attacks just trying to walk. Oh, I had high heart rates upon trying to walk, on doing something wrong diet-wise, backsliding, and for just no apparent reason. And my doctor has since told me that that was accumulated stress. I didn't know that was a thing. Accumulated stress. When you start having symptoms of anxiety and panic attack, it's likely that's accumulated stress if you haven't had any triggers that caused it. Tightness, tight throat chronically, tight tummy, tight chest. Started with the throat, went to the tummy, then to the chest. Almost constantly, especially with exercise. Breathing, increased work of breathing. Periods of shortness of breath. Legs, odd, uncomfortable, weird feelings and pain in legs upon exercising. My torso, it's hard to describe this, a sickening feeling when lightly pressing anywhere on my torso. Anywhere. This sickening feeling immediately worsened with the slightest increase in stressors or when low on fuel or sleep. Cold. Low body temperature and cold hands and feet. Brain, irritability, forgetfulness, indecision. Like I say, I turned my decisions over to my wife. Severe stress intolerance, panic attacks, and an almost constant state of anxiety and fear for a year and a half. Yet, during this time, I ate as best I could. I checked all the ingredients. I stayed close to God. I asked church members to pray with me. I claimed Bible promises. Turns out I was claiming them incorrectly. It wasn't a promise that I was claiming. It was, well, something else. I'll have to get to that. I asked church members to pray with me. I asked to be anointed. I went to a lifestyle center for a week. I had 6 visits to the ER, multiple visits to my doctor, multiple kinds of expensive tests, and nothing worked. I was doing everything right, I thought. After reviewing all my tests, my last final tests, I had had so many, that and they all came back negative. My doctor finally, convinced that it was all in my head, pronounced that, John, since you hate respiratory therapy, you are making yourself sick so that you won't have to return to work. Then the doctor commanded me with a disapproving air of authority, you need to go back to work. What do you think I did? I fired my doctor and found another one. She was in the parking lots of the right ball field, but she thought I was doing it because I wanted to get out of respiratory. Well, I did want to get out of respiratory. That wasn't it. It was close, though. We'll get to that. Sometime later, Susan and I finally figured out how to deal with the sleep apnea. Whenever I awoke gasping with sleep apnea, Susan would pray for me and start reading the Bible to me out loud. Now get this, that always worked and allowed me to sleep the rest of the night. Was sleep apnea a sign of satanic oppression? Why did the reading of the Bible and Jesus get involved? Why did that work? However, this last night, the last night before we found the answers, praying and reading did not work. It happened all night long until morning. And Susan and I took it as a sign from God that we were supposed to go to the ER. Turns out it actually was God's leading. My time of enlightenment and deliverance was at hand. This was the 7th ER visit, and a brand new doctor was there with a new perspective. And I did something unusual as well. This time, like I say, there was a new doctor, but and he seemed to be a down-to-earth sort of guy. I gave him a written list of all my symptoms, and in as brief little bullet points as I could, including waking up with a gasp. He looked at the list, he looked at me, and just calmly said, I think we'll try some Xanax. If you know anything about drugs, you know that that is an anti-anxiety medicine. I didn't say anything because this was beginning, as he said that, the reality of the true cause of my condition immediately began to dawn on me. I knew what Xanax was, an anti-anxiety med. No other doctor told me about the possibility of anxiety. And as it turns out, ER medical staff tend to resist that diagnosis and are required by law to treat patients' symptoms, even if the doc knows it's just anxiety. Besides, most patients deny that it's anxiety. They would turn a doctor in for saying that, or complain, or write them up or something. And it happened to me too. I had seen this in action numerous times when I worked as a respiratory therapist in the ER. And now it applied to me. And just so you know, that was not without embarrassment. I thought I was immune to anxiety. All of this was going through my head, and I just listened. I didn't say anything. He told me, after he gave me the pill, Xanax, he told me that I would soon be nodding off to sleep while in that ER bed, and because I was up all night. And when I felt that sensation of growing heat in my chest that I had been experiencing before I would wake up with a gasp, that would, let me read that over. And when I felt that sensation of growing heat in my chest that would always wake me up with a gasp, that I was to just ignore it and not let it wake me up. He said that the Xanax would enable that. And you know what? It did. That one tiny little pill acted as a diagnostic procedure for me. That was its value that day. I believe I only took 1/2 of one pill when I got home. And that was it. I never took it again. I know this tricky little trap. So to me, the value was the diagnostic of it. Without the doctor ever saying it. Hold on, that didn't go forward. Oh, yes, I did. Without the doctor ever saying it, it was dawning on me that all these symptoms were born out of fear, anxiety. That growing warm feeling in my chest that wakes me up with a gasp was actually adrenaline being generated by my mind to wake me up. The doctor explained that my sleep apnea wasn't sleep apnea at all, but sleep panic attacks. I didn't know that existed. Both share the same symptoms of waking up with a gasp. I know. I treat patients with sleep apnea. I put them on their breathing machines. I've watched them while they sleep, and they wake up with a gasp over and over all night. So I thought I was having apnea. It wasn't. So my reaction to that, you could imagine, is that. Thank God, there was finally an explanation and some hope. All those symptoms were caused by fear. Fear of being the exception to quick healing after surgery. Yes, I thought that. Fear that my food would hurt me after my gallbladder was gone. Fear of every slight ache or pain. Fear of getting sicker. Fear of dying. Fear is a type of expectation of harm. Did you know that? It's an expectation of bad things. Well, unfortunately, if you know anything about the mind, The mind tends to give us what we expect. Very important. My history just begins to show the incredible danger of unrestrained fear. I had been indulging my fears instead of resisting them. I didn't know that I could. As soon as I found out all this, I had a choice to make, which many of you may have had already or may certainly soon. You can treat the symptoms and deal with the side effects, or you can treat the cause and receive God's blessing. Now, which would you want to choose? Which should you choose? The doctor sent me home with a bottle of Xanax, but I already knew where to get real lasting help. The chapter called Mind Cure in the book Ministry of Healing. Some of you were already thinking that, weren't you? I went right to it. This was the subject of the very first health class at the lifestyle center I attended while trying to get better. But I had immediately dismissed the subject as having no relevance to me whatsoever. I thought it was above it all. And some of you, like I say, may be doing the same thing right now. If you're human, you're susceptible to this. Maybe you just haven't been tested on this yet. But after this last ER visit, I went home, read the chapter, Mind Cure, and it was like reading a prophecy of my own experience. That is not a laugh of pleasure. The solutions were so simple and laid out just for me. And this solution came with God's blessings. I read that disease is sometimes produced and is often greatly aggravated by the imagination. That was me. And it just keeps going here. Many are lifelong invalids who might be well if they only thought so. Incredible danger. Many imagine that every slight exposure will cause illness, and the evil effect is produced because it is expected. This is pivotal, life-changing information that I am vindicating now by my own experience. Many die from disease, the cause of which is wholly imaginary. This is revolutionary. I am convinced that if God had not intervened and I had not read Mind Cure, that I would be dead by now, absolutely years ago. I was developing so many illnesses. So, application, mental health is an integral part of present truth, part of health reform, and needs to be part of our gospel medical ministry work. Fortunately, I found by experience that a healing effect can also be produced if it is expected. That idea saved my life, and it'll save yours and your clients as well. The power of the mind to heal and the power of the mind to destroy, to kill. How I overcame fear and symptoms. We're just going to bullet point these. I started expecting to be well. That was the first thing. Then I read, if you are in constant fear that your food will hurt you, it most assuredly will. This was a very big issue for me. So I stopped fretting over the ingredients of my food, focused on their health qualities, asked God's blessing on it, and threw out all the conflicting worldly counsel I had gathered and used ministry of healing exclusively. When I said I stopped fretting over the ingredients, that means if I see a box of whatever there that I was already made a decision to eat, I did not check the ingredients first because I was going to eat it anyway. Checking the ingredients, that just increases the fear. Just make sure you buy healthy. If I had heeded all the conflicting counsels on food from all those worldly health books, all of which made sense, by the way, I would not have been allowed to eat anything. I read that Often invalids can resist disease simply by refusing to yield to ailments and settle down in a state of inactivity. Just say no, literally. I have found this to be true. And I've used that a lot, and I'll tell you a little more about it as we go. So number 3, when a fear symptom showed up, I immediately commanded no and exhaled the symptom away while imagining what it feels like to be relieved of it. That works about 90% of the time. If it doesn't work, means, well, I might consider that something's real instead of just in my mind. But that one is very, very important. Just say no when you feel the symptom and take a deep breath. Exhale while imagining feeling relief. Imagine feeling like what you want to feel. And it works. It works. I then discovered this principle. Look away from self. One of the surest hindrances to the recovery of the sick is the centering of attention upon themselves. Oh, that was so me. Many invalids feel that everyone should give them sympathy and help. Oh, what a burden that person made himself. When what they really need is to have their attention turned away from themselves, to think of and care for others. Now that's a natural remedy. This led me to realize that the more I dwelt on my sickness, the sicker and more self-centered I became. And that was embarrassing. So I would imagine what being well felt like, especially as I painfully exercised, and that worked. So I also helped my neighbor out with a few projects, and that proved beneficial as well. Got my mind off of things. I had my own woodshop projects that helped divert my mind from fear. But potluck was my biggest and most reliable reprieve, complete 100% reprieve from fear and suffering. It was the social factor. I had no symptoms during potluck, and I was aware of it. And I had always wondered why. By the way, when I went to Sabbath school and church, my symptoms actually got worse, not better. Not quite sure why of that yet. Still don't know. But potluck, when I got to socialize, it made all the difference. God used all this to teach me, and now you, that the more I dwelt on my sinfulness, the more sinful I became. It was amazing how simple that change of emphasis was, but it made all the difference in my healing. Then Ministry of Healing pointed out the power of the will. You might be familiar with this. The power of the will is not valued as it should be. Excuse me. Let me get a drink of water here. Let the will be kept awake and rightly directed. Rightly directed, rightly directed. Do not let it go to sleep. And it will impart energy to the whole, energy? Your will can impart energy to the whole being? Wow. And will be a wonderful aid in the maintenance of health. The will be a wonderful aid to the maintenance of health. This needs more prominence in our seminars, in our caring for the sick. A wonderful aid in the maintenance of health. It is a power also in dealing with disease. Exercised in the right direction, it would control the imagination and be a potent means of resisting and overcoming disease of both mind and body. There are thousands who can recover health if they will. They should make up their minds to be, well, fabulous, revolutionary, ignored truth. You can't just say New Start is the whole package. It is not. So I determined to be well, and I became well. I would often say out loud when feeling yucky, I choose to be well. And that worked. Finally, I read, it will cost a determined effort to change the current of thoughts, but the change can be made. So I gave it the time and effort needed, and that worked too. Now, here's an interesting freely associated thought that came to me. It occurred to me while putting this all together that perhaps these mind cure principles could be applied to my lifelong OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. My OCD was merciless, tenacious, ridiculous, enslaving, and offensive. Nervous tics of every sort my whole life. I seemed to have no ability to control it, and yet I could. But the compulsion to it always overwhelmed me. And it certainly, well, hold on. And it certainly did not require pharmaceuticals. I applied the principles and it worked on OCD too. And it didn't take much at all. Certainly not pharmaceuticals. Apparently, I had the ability to end them all along. My OCD was a fear anxiety response that started with the severe abuse I experienced growing up at home with my parents. And that kind of stuck with me. But I allowed it to become an unchecked indulgence in fear anxiety, which became habitual. It took on a life of its own in the limbic system, bypassing my frontal lobe altogether, which means it's going to be hard to overcome. It manifested itself in nervous tics. But following God's counsel in Mind Cure, I overcame OCD without a single psych drug. I overcame fear, anxiety, panic attacks, and OCD without psych drugs. I overcame many health conditions without a single pharmaceutical. Well, other than that first day in ER. It was so simple. I simply had to immediately, I'm going to say that again, I simply had to immediately and consistently reject the symptom, the emotion, or the OCD impulse, and then it would just go away. 2 Corinthians 10:4-5. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations. Until I was sick, I never thought of that. I never made that application. And every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Well, now I have a real good inkling of what that really means, of how that's done, how you bring it into captivity. If God doesn't give us, for God hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. If God doesn't give us the spirit of fear, where does it come from? Well, we can generate it ourselves, or Satan has certain rights. He's allowed to pop thoughts, even feelings into our heads, but it's up to us what we do with those thoughts and feelings. We have some power. We don't have to accept a harmful thought or feeling, no matter where it comes from. Excuse me. We have been given the power of choice, and we can choose to instantly reject negative and harmful thoughts and feelings. Just say no. Just because a bird lands in your hair doesn't mean you have to let it build a nest there. It's simpler, so much simpler, and it doesn't require pharmaceuticals. Resisting negative emotions can become a habit by repetition. It takes as much effort to develop a healthy mind as it does to develop a healthy body. We can instantly reject mind and body destroying fear and bring it into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ. Resist the devil and he shall flee from you. Well, what if we don't resist the devil? What if we don't resist fear? we are told to guard well the avenues of the soul. Do you know where I'm going with this? Could unrestrained fear be one of those avenues to the soul that Satan has access to? I'm thinking. Does unrestrained fear give the enemy of our souls a degree of access to our minds? We know that unrestrained fear leads to anxiety, and anxiety leads to panic attacks. We know that unrestrained tics lead to OCD. OCD, unrestrained, leads to Tourette's syndrome. Tourette's syndrome has the fingerprints of demonic possession, oppression, and harassment. You agree with that? Does that make sense? There were 4 times where the symptoms that I was experiencing were so severe and out of character with even the stuff I was already feeling, out of the norm, that the thought occurred to me, what if this is something other? So I asked God to, quote, contend with them that contend with me. That's a Bible quote, Bible promise. All 4 of those times, those symptoms immediately dropped. And that was not normal either, because my symptoms, even with all my different techniques, they wouldn't just immediately drop. They took some time. These, when I asked God to contend with him that contends with me, gone immediately. What we know for certain is that God has not given us a spirit of fear and does not approve of us indulging in it. Philippians 4:4-8. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything, everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known unto God, and the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and minds through Christ Jesus. Now, most people stop right there as though that's all Paul had to say on that matter of anxiety. No. The very next paragraph, Paul tells us that it takes more than just prayer. He tells exactly how to eliminate anxiety in his next paragraph. Some of you know what's coming. He continues and says, finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, are of good report, have any virtue, if there be any praise, you think on these things. This is a prescription for mental health, which is a prescription for body health. It's the prescription to bring every thought into captivity. The brain doesn't have an off switch. You can't, not even when you're sleeping. You can't just take your mind off of something like fear and anxiety. You have to replace the negative thought with something good. It's made all the difference for me, and it will for anyone. I think if everyone would do this on a regular basis, we'd have world peace. Now, here are a few more of the quotes that enabled me to overcome my long reign of fear and its devastating effect on my health. Just a moment here. Oh, here we are. The relation that exists between the mind and the body is very intimate. This is Ministry of Healing. When one is affected, the other sympathizes. The condition of the mind affects the health to a far greater degree than many realize. That's so true. Many of the diseases from which men suffer are the result of mental depression, grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust, all tend to break down the life forces and to invite decay and death. She tells us in another place, I just remember, that it is not good for us to gather in our minds all the horrible things that we've done in the past. Don't do that. It will destroy us. From a prophet of the Lord, folks. But courage, hope, faith, sympathy, love, promote health, and prolong life. A contented mind, a cheerful spirit is health to the body and strength to the soul. Yes, a merry, joyful heart doeth good like a medicine. Nothing tends more to promote health of body and of soul than does a spirit of gratitude and praise. Now, here is an interesting thought. It is a positive duty. It's a duty to resist melancholy, discontented thoughts and feelings, as much a duty as it is to pray. How can she use any stronger language than that? That is amazing. These depressing emotions are a great injury to them, health-wise, for by hindering the process of digestion, they interfere with nutrition. This is still Ministry of Healing. Digestion. No wonder my food wasn't giving me any energy. No wonder I was nauseated for months. No wonder I had months of diarrhea. No wonder I lost 20 pounds. All that anxiety was hindering with my digestion. While grief and anxiety cannot remedy a single evil, they can do great harm. And I experienced that. But cheerfulness and hope, while they brighten the pathway of others, are life unto those that find them, and health to all their flesh. The Bible is filled with quotes admonishing us to be courageous and fear not. Fear not, for I am thy shield and thy exceeding great reward. Be strong and of a good courage, fear not, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord thy God, he it is that doth go with thee. He will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. Have not I commanded thee? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be thou dismayed, for the Lord thy God is with thee. Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I am thy God. I will strengthen thee. Yeah, I will help thee. Yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness. For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways. Be not afraid, only believe. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. We are not to let the future, with its hard problems, its unsatisfying prospects, make our hearts faint, our knees tremble, our hands hang down, like it did me. Those who surrendered their lives to his guidance and to his service will never be placed in a position for which God has not made provision. Whatever our situation, if we are doers of his word, we have a guide to direct our way. Whatever our perplexity, we have a sure counselor. Whatever our sorrow, bereavement, or loneliness, we have a sympathizing friend. Yea, ye that have been born by me from your birth, that have been carried by me from your earliest breath, even to your old age, I am the same. Even to hoar hairs, I will carry you. I have done it, and I will still bear you. I will carry, and I will deliver you. Lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. To him that overcometh will I grant to sit with me in my throne. Revelation 3:21. I'm just going to pray as we close. Lord Father, what incredible mercy you have given us. What blessings you provide for us. We have been so slow to learn, so slow to believe your prophets. We ask for your power in this movement, in the health reform, in the gospel medical missionary work. Power to revive, to reform, to reach others, to teach others, with the Spirit of God blessing our efforts. We leave this presentation, Lord, with a spirit of gratitude for you in revealing so many things that we needed to hear for our health. Had you not told us this, how would we have known? We thank you so much. In Jesus' name, amen. Folks, thank you for attending this and for being with me for inviting me here. I'm going to stop this recording and say good night.